It's a funny place to be, stuck in a seemingly mundane world with an inner knowing that the universe is so much more than our mortal minds can comprehend. Yet we all have the capacity to know peace and our oneness with the wholeness of life. And through these interviews, discussions, and reflections, it is my intention to share this possibility. I'm Ryan Kurczak, and this is the Kriya Yoga Podcast. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Kriya Yoga Podcast. This particular episode is a rebroadcast of Christopher Sartain's The Western Yoga Podcast, episode 32. Christopher Sartain is a fellow Kriya Yoga student of Roy Eugene Davis. He's a Kriya Yoga teacher, and he asked me to do an interview with him where I wasn't quite sure what we were going to talk about, and he presented a series of questions to me, which some were surprising and a few of them caught me off guard. But overall, re-listening to the original recording, I thought it would be wonderful to share this with the audience of the Kriya Yoga Podcast, and Christopher agreed. So in this podcast, we talk about things such as orthodoxy and dogma. We talk about how useful it is to deify a spiritual teacher and what the avatar trap is. We talk about the larger picture of Kriya Yoga organizations. And we also touch upon the idea of Kriya initiation, the importance of Kriya initiation, as well as how developing mental, emotional health and well-being assists us to get the most out of this Kriya Yoga path, this meditative, contemplative path. So you can find Christopher's original recording on youtube.com/@KriyaYogi. And this is episode 32. And on his YouTube channel, you can see the video recording if you feel you need that. Also, being episode 32, you've got about 31 other episodes that you could tune into from Christopher Sartain. So let's go ahead and get started. And I'm grateful to have had the fellowship of Chris, and I've been grateful the entire time I've known him. So hopefully this episode will be of benefit and of interest to you as well.
Well, I'm so happy to be here today with my dear friend Ryan Kurczak, fellow Kriya Yoga teacher and fellow student of Roy Eugene Davis. And today we're going to discuss his journey as a Kriya Yoga teacher. And of course, the theme of this podcast is Western yoga or westernized yoga or yoga as it is practiced and taught in the West. Ryan is quite obviously a Westerner and lives in West Virginia even.
Yes.
So we'll discuss his journey as a Kriya Yoga teacher and some of the common sort of pitfalls that we all experience as Kriya Yoga teachers, myself included, and how we can sort of avoid some of those common pitfalls as teachers in this tradition. So I'm going to start off with just a series of questions for Ryan, dealing with different subjects and how important he thinks they are in this Kriya Yoga path or the spiritual enlightenment path in general. And so, Ryan, to start, how important is orthodoxy and dogma in the Kriya Yoga path?
Well, that's a very good question. So orthodoxy and dogma. I was not expecting that as the first one. I think that it's not super important. However, I do think that it is valuable at a certain stage. So in the beginning, we do need some guidelines to follow. And for people who are a little more erratic or are a little more kind of hard to get into the role of being more disciplined, it might be for them that some sort of dogma or orthodoxy could kind of help give them something to believe in enough so that they're able to continue on the path until they don't necessarily need that anymore, and they can be a little more fluid, a little more alive with it.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense to me. And when I refer to dogma, I'm referring to sort of this tendency within organizations, let's say, to adhere to a specific belief system or set of beliefs, which in time becomes a type of orthodoxy, especially within organizations, which I see as a bit problematic, and certainly not the way we were taught, really.
Right. Right.
To have rigid belief systems around all of this stuff. And that's why I asked that particular question. But yeah, I agree that certainly in the beginning, structure can be very, very important.
Right. Well, what makes it so hard, if you don't mind if I said one more thing about that?
Mm-hmm.
What makes it so hard is, in the beginning, like, for example, if we take the yamas and niyamas, being harmlessness, being truthful, practicing contentment, and so on, in the beginning, it might require a person to just say, you know what, this is what the authority said, I need to follow, this is the doctrine of this system. And so even if the person doesn't quite yet understand really why those things are important, that kind of orthodoxy, I think, can be helpful to them until they kind of realize it for themselves. When I think of things like dogma that are problematic, I think it's more like deifying a particular person or kind of.
That's on my list. Huh.
Oh, is it? Okay. Well, then we'll wait. I'll save that comment for then.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's go there. How important is it to deify and worship your spiritual teacher in the Kriya Yoga path?
Again, it's something that's got some nuance to it, because on one hand, you don't, well, at least from my experience, and I never did this with Mr. Davis, which some people, I guess, kind of find some fault with me for, to deify a teacher, in my mind, I think that creates kind of what might be considered an avatar trap. That's like the term that I've used. Mm-hmm. And that's the sense where, for example, when we look at Paramahansa Yogananda, and now everyone says, well, he's an avatar. Okay. Right. Well, you don't quite get that from his book, considering how he grew from a child to a young adult to where he became the teacher that he did. There was a progression in that regard. And one of the difficulties with making someone an avatar or deifying them is that it causes the students, it gives them a greater capacity to self-sabotage, because if they think, well, this person is so far beyond me, well, that makes it very easy for them to say, well, there's no way I can do that. So why do I need to try as hard as they might have tried? Even with Yogananda, he didn't become the way he was because he was just naturally born into that. He had to be trained by Sri Yukteswar. He had to have his devotion channeled and so on. He even changed as the years went on. So, in my experience, while I absolutely love and respect and honor our teacher, Roy Eugene Davis, I've never felt like deifying him, because he represented something that was important to me, and that love and that honor and that respect helped to inspire me to continue. But I think if I would have looked at him and thought, he is so much further beyond me, it would have made me, at least personally, maybe not try as hard. Yeah. So I think there's some nuances to all that.
Yeah, absolutely. Agreed. How important are Machiavellian power plays within organizations in the Kriya Yoga path? Will that lead to enlightened states of consciousness?
What was the last thing you said?
Is that important for our enlightenment process?
No, I don't think so. And again, that's the difficult thing about having an organization. And when you've got an organization, you definitely have personalities involved. And when personalities get involved, while there are a lot of well-meaning people, you never really know really deep down inside what someone's thinking. And this is one of the difficulties that I kind of have with organizations, is that what you just described, or the term you used, like that can really get in the way of a person's ability to know what they should be doing. And it can also get in the way of a person's faith and trust in the entire process. Because if you get caught up in an organizational situation, and like all organizations, there's some kind of human drama involved. Well, a lot of people will look at that and they'll say, well, I don't want to participate in that. And so then they fall away and they don't benefit from, the point of the organization, which is to support a teaching, a methodology, and a process that contributes to greater well-being. So no, I don't think those things are useful at all, really.
Agreed. How important is it to accumulate as many followers or disciples as humanly possible in the Kriya Yoga path?
Well, that's a good question. These are just wonderful. I have to admit, I have never been this surprised by a series of questions before. So thank you for giving me a new experience here.
Wonderful.
This kind of goes back to the idea of organizations and what makes it so difficult. Because on one level, if you have an organization, you do have to have people there to support it. And so having more people show up can be helpful in that regard. However, from my experience, when it comes down to teaching Kriya Yoga, the numbers aren't important. What's important is are people showing up who are willing to pay attention and apply what they learn. And this is something that you probably have experienced, I'm sure. And I know Roy experienced, and I experienced when I had the opportunity to be in charge of a meditation center. Sometimes people would show up, and rather than thinking, great, I'm here to learn this process, the first thing that comes out of their mouth is, well, how many people come here? And my response was always in my mind. I never really said it out loud too much. Who cares how many people come here? Like, are you here to learn a particular way of practicing Kriya Yoga, or are you here just to participate in a community where there's lots of people? So when it comes to learning Kriya Yoga itself, I don't think large numbers really are that important. I think it's more of the quality work that's important.
Absolutely. That leads into my next question. How important is it to fit in and feel a sense of belonging in the Kriya Yoga path?
I think it helps to have some similarities between people. It just tends to make things a little more harmonious. But ultimately, when we're participating in a spiritual path, what's important is, are we learning to meditate well? Are we learning to understand what's written in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali and the Bhagavad Gita? And if people are different, I think that can be helpful, because it will also teach us to be a little more broad-minded, to accept different viewpoints, and to see that it's okay that we can learn and grow together, even if we have different tastes in how we dress, or different tastes in how we live, and what we find to be useful. Even in yoga, there are people like Yogananda who are very devotional, who are very emotional, and they're like a powerhouse of this kind of like emotional energy. And then there are people like Roy Eugene Davis that we knew, and probably Sri Yukteswar, although I never met him, who they were just as devotional, but they were more austere. And they had the ability to understand the yoga process just as much as Yogananda, but it just wasn't as flamboyant. So I think having an ability to get along with different kinds of people, as long as you know that you're going in the same direction, that can be pretty helpful.
Yeah, I agree. Community can be helpful for sure, as long as it's not the priority. Like you were saying, that the people arrive, and the first thing they want to know is, where's the community? How is the community? How can I belong? How can I fit in here?
Yeah.
Rather than how can you help me wake up and even.
Right.
Let's see. How important is it to go out of your way to prevent other teachers from stealing your students in the Kriya Yoga path?
Okay, so how important is it to go out of your way to prevent other teachers from stealing your students in the Kriya Yoga path, correct?
Right.
I guess it depends on if they're nefarious and manipulative teachers. Then you might want to prevent them from stealing your students.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So, but the way I look at it is that many of the teachers that I have met, they're very different in regards to maybe how they've interpreted certain things or what they find to be more important. And my sense has always been that a student should find a teacher that is able to help them the most, and they should find a teacher that they're able to develop the best authentic rapport with. And so, for example, if we did a retreat together, and people from different like your mailing list or maybe my mailing list showed up, and they listened to you talk, and they thought, well, Ryan's great and all, but something about Chris, there's just a way he presents it that I think I understand a little bit better. In my mind,
the likelihood of that occurring is somewhere around 0%.
No, I don't know about that.
We'll use it. We'll use it for the purposes of the discussion.
Yeah, you'd be surprised, but in my mind, I personally would want that student to go learn with you, because the ultimate goal is to keep the person inspired and to keep them learning about what is important on the Kriya Yoga path. So ultimately, when you asked that question, that was something I had thought about recently, and then it popped up in my mind. Well, it is important, I think, to try to, be clear that you don't want your students to get involved with other folks who just want to kind of manipulate them or take advantage of them. You don't want that to happen to your friends. You don't want that to happen to your family. And I don't know how often that happens. I've never really seen that happen. But I think that is an important reason to possibly try to keep that from happening. But otherwise, I think that just with the difference in variety of approaches and presentations, I personally feel that a student should go where they feel they belong, and I think that's the most important thing.
For sure.
Yeah.
Agreed. How important is it for someone to touch your forehead for 30 seconds?
You're talking about like the Kriya initiation?
Yeah.
Well, this is a little bit longer response. And it comes from watching and observing people who go through initiations and people who apply the Kriya techniques. And what I have observed is that people who tend to look for that special initiation experience, but they don't actually practice what they learn, the person who knows how to meditate, the person who has committed themselves to meditating, to studying, and to living a yogic lifestyle, those people tend to make the greatest progress versus someone who might have gotten initiation from the greatest yogi in the world. And I've seen this happen so many times, such that, when I teach Kriya Yoga to people, sometimes they don't participate in an initiation until a year or two after they've learned many of the procedures. But what's interesting about that is those people who have spent that amount of time, a year or 2 years, really trying to figure it out, really, really learning how to meditate well, when they actually get to the initiation, it's like it impacts them in a more profound way. So given the option of just getting initiation from who you might think is the holiest of holies, or actually doing the work, I think doing the work is more important. But I also think, and have seen, the people who are doing the work and then participate in initiation and then have that moment of blessing that a teacher gives during that process, that really empowers them. It's like putting water and fertilizer on freshly prepared soil and seeds. Whereas before, you're putting that water and fertilizer on there and maybe the ground's not ready for it yet. So just like some of these questions, there are some nuances to it, but that wouldn't be something that I would put the most emphasis towards.
Right. Yeah, there's because I give an online correspondence course, and of course I'm unable to give them the blessing as part of that initiation process online, obviously.
Right.
And I've been judged rather harshly by some for doing that or even offering that as an option. And I always tell people, well, and of course they have the option to come here to our
Yeah.
retreat center, and we can do the initiation ceremony here in person, and many have come to do that. But I also tell people, look, Roy told me once that about 90% or so of the people that he initiated in person didn't keep practicing after the initiation. So what's more important? Having a saintly person or someone that's part of the lineage or something like that. By the way, not including myself in that saintly person category, but I'm just saying, what's more important? Having someone touch your forehead for a few seconds during an hour-long initiation ceremony, let's say, or being devoted and disciplined in your daily sadhana and in your practice. Of course, you will reap far more benefits from your daily practice than you ever could from someone touching your forehead and giving you a blessing. Also, I like to tell people that you can ask for God's grace and blessing at any time. God doesn't live in our hand. So therefore, it's to me sort of a silly notion that one can only receive the blessing and grace of God or the lineage via the touch of someone. It just
it's like Catholicism.
The middleman.
Yeah,
the middleman. Exactly. It's completely unnecessary. But yes, you're right. I have noticed that folks that are very devoted on their path and have practiced for a couple of years without knowing me personally or anything like that, or in person rather, when they do come here to do the more formal Kriya initiation ceremony, they benefit far more, and they're and I think it even kindles more devotion after the process.
Right. And we've got such a wonderful opportunity with technology these days. When I first went to CSA, and probably you too, we didn't have these opportunities. If we wanted to learn, we had to like drive down there or fly over there or whatever. And and I don't know what your experience was, but I had read Autobiography of a Yogi, and I had a general idea of kind of what might happen. But I spent a week there, and then I learned the techniques, and that was it. And I don't know. Sometimes it feels to me like having a little more preparation would be good, and having like what you're talking about, having correspondence courses, having Zoom, having the ability to do meetings like this. It allows people to actually now take the time to study and get a sense of what it's all about. That way, when it does come time to do an initiation, the people who really are, they're not just trying to get a boost. They're really wanting it to be part of the commitment of their path in life. They tend to get more out of it, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've noticed the same thing. So some of these questions were silly, and intentionally so, and a bit sarcastic. I know Yogananda said that sarcasm's not good, but what can I tell you?
Sometimes you got to let it out.
But the whole purpose of that was to demonstrate that, looking around without being judgmental, as I look at a lot of different Kriya organizations or Kriya teachers, I see them prioritizing the wrong things, and I'm sure you've observed the same thing. So my question to you is, why is that? I mean, what's going on? It's almost like, in a certain sense, Kriya and some organizations and traditions has become almost like a caricature of itself. And what's going on? Why is that? Why are organizations and teachers prioritizing the wrong things?
Yeah, I can only speculate on that, and I think it's just human nature. I think it seems. I think it's been going on since religion's organized, really.
Yes.
And I think it's also partially related to the idea that, Lahiri Mahasaya he wasn't really too thrilled about the idea of things being organized.
That's right.
And my speculation is because when you begin to organize something, what happens then is now that has to be supported. And so, for example, if you have buildings, if you have property, if you have you have to maintain those things. Yeah. And in order to maintain those things, it might not always work to sit up there and just simply focus on the pure essence of what Kriya Yoga is about. Why? Because many people have difficulty kind of coming to terms with some of the principles in Kriya Yoga because they're hard things to grasp, like non-attachment or being content in all circumstances. And religion and spirituality for a long time also really plays a role of allowing people to feel safe in a community situation. And so more people, this is again my speculation, want to feel safe in a community situation rather than they want to do the tapas or that intensity in spiritual practice, which is hard and really causes you to need to confront your psychological complexes and encourage you, as Roy would say, to grow up mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Many people don't want to do that. And, we can go on and on about the whys and so on, but, the state of the world, we're filled with, we're surrounded by people like me and you probably, and others whom have experienced traumas in our lives and difficulties. And oftentimes what we want more than anything is safety. And, kind of focusing more on the organizational aspect of things, that tends to give more of what people want, that sense of safety. So that's my theory. I don't know how true it is or not, but that's something that I've reflected upon and kind of come to on my own.
Yeah, I think that's probably a fairly safe bet.
Well, even in my own presentation,
mm-hmm.
I do, like you, I do a lot of work online, and people find me through YouTube and books and podcasts, and I don't like to encourage people to say, let's go start a Facebook group and start talking about all this stuff.
Right.
Because I want people to, where they are in their individual lives and their individual homes, to apply the yogic principles and learn how to meditate rather than focus on the community aspect of things. I think it's great to come together once or twice a year just to have that kind of experience. But when people are on their own and they're learning to practice on their own, then the emphasis is towards getting better at their practice. And I've had people, criticize me because I don't want to instigate a community. They say, "Oh, he's trying to keep us separated so he can control all of us." I'm thinking, what are you talking about? Yeah, that's exactly what I want. I want to sit here in the world headquarters for Kriya Yoga Online and manipulate everyone all over the world. It's like they don't understand. I barely have enough time to answer the emails that I've got, let alone do things like that. So I think it's just people just really want that. They want to belong, and I think it's because of psychological issues. What happened when they were children, what happened in their own community, and it's hard to see beyond that, really.
Yeah, when you were talking, it reminded me of something Roy said, or that I heard him say. Someone was complaining to him one time that they didn't have any other members of his organization living in their community nearby, and he said, "You're lucky." Yeah, this is my favorite things he ever said. He just
exactly. Well, and Roy Yogananda sent him to Phoenix, right? Right. three or so months after he was accepted and initiated, and he said he loved that because he had his ability to just focus on the practice. But I think it's important to recognize that people have different kinds of needs. Mm-hmm. And so, for example, from my experience, if someone needs the community aspect of things, or wants a kind of like father figure to say, "I am the great guru and you must listen to me," well, I'm not the Kriya Yoga teacher you should come to.
That's for sure.
Yeah. but there are other organizations, there are other teachers that for whatever reason they like that and they serve that population. And just like we talked about flock rating, that kind of thing.
Right.
I send people to other places because I want them to have what they need. Because, there's one story that Roy told, I'm sure you've heard it. I think it's in Paramahansa Yogananda's I Knew Him, where he and Herbert Freed, the minister from Phoenix, went to visit one of the members. And when they walked in, the woman showed this picture, this painting of this old wise man with celestial cosmic stuff behind him.
Ascended master.
Yes, an ascended master, right. And the woman said, this is my master, or something like that. You might know the story better than I do. And Roy looked at Herbert kind of like, what's she talking about? But he didn't say anything. Mm. And then when Roy went to meet with Paramahansa Yogananda, Yogananda told him, I'm glad you didn't say anything, because right now that is what she needs in order to stay engaged. And if you had criticized her or said, that's not true, that might have driven her away, and she wouldn't have been able to get the benefit of maintaining more long-term association with Yogananda and so on. So this is such a, it's I'm glad we're talking about it, but it is such a nuanced topic. I keep using that word.
Well, as you know, if you follow politics, nuance is a bit of an endangered species of sorts.
Yes.
Along with sophisticated arguments, and so I'm happy to talk about nuance. I know that the world is nuanced, and that a lot of these spiritual topics require nuance, and they're not black and white. And so I'm happy to discuss all these things with you. Go ahead.
Yeah. Remember what you're going to say.
Well, I was going to ask you how you've been able to, or perhaps you've experienced some. I've experienced some of these questions that I asked. Mm-hmm. I've experienced some of these things. As a spiritual teacher, there is the tendency to become a bit narcissistic, and you have to promote. If you're not part of an organization, well, who's going to promote you? You, right? Right. So you have to engage in a certain level of self-promotion, which can, if left uncontrolled, turn into a bit of narcissism. That term is very strong, but I think you know what I'm getting at. So how have you been able to avoid? Because I know you, and I know you've been able to avoid a lot of these pitfalls. So, what does that look like in your process as a teacher?
I think that I understand the question, and it does speak to what I was getting ready to say. I think the difference is, if no one came to any of my classes, if no one read my books, if no one listened to my podcasts, I'd go do something else. And what I mean by that is, I don't define myself through this role. And I think that's important, because what happens is, I think for many people, for many people, what happens is they become identified with a role, and then they feel they have to do everything that they need to support that role. And Roy didn't do this. And you see, this is a lesson I learned very early. Well, maybe not early on, midway in my relationship with Roy. When we opened up the Asheville Kriya Yoga Center, the CSA Center in Asheville, what did he say to me? He said, wear a suit, wear a tie, cut your hair, show up, sit there on that chair, maybe say one or two words, then meditate silently for the rest of the time. And here I was in Asheville, North Carolina, where if those who are listening, if you're familiar with that, it's sort of like a spiritual mecca. Everyone is a yogi. Everyone is a guru.
New Age capital of the East Coast.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. They say, you can't throw a rock without hitting like a shaman and a massage therapist and a Reiki master. They're probably all the same person. And so I was doing this, and I'm thinking, well, I'm in Asheville, North Carolina. No one wants to come and meditate with someone who looks like a banker, right. And I didn't quite understand what he was wanting, but I did it. And I was thinking to myself, it's not going to work, because people have so many other options. Mm-hmm. But what I know now, I know why he was doing that, because he wanted people to show up and he wanted me to teach, not because I looked a certain part, not because I looked like someone who could teach Kriya Yoga. I could, but he wanted people to show up who were able to kind of see beyond the outer covering, I suppose. And so when some teachers, they become so obsessed with like being seen, being seen, being seen, well, that kind of takes over their drive, and then they don't know, like it's like they become trapped in it. Well, I can't do anything else, so I have to keep doing this thing. Whereas what I think is useful is and I try to tell my students this too, what I think is useful is if you have such a profound interest in yoga and meditation, that you would do it whether anyone knew you were doing it, that you would do it whether anyone acknowledged you. In my experience, the best teachers are those people who they would do what they did, whether or not, they were getting recognized for it. And even when it comes to finances and so on, you and I both had the good fortune to go to Center for Spiritual Awareness. And Roy, he never asked us for any money. Of course, we were not encouraged. He didn't even encourage us. They accepted donations,
right,
to help keep things going. But there was no emphasis towards the financial aspect of things. And I think that's important, because once you kind of get caught up in that, it's hard to go back. And that's why I said, if no one paid any attention to anything I was doing, I personally would continue to practice. I personally would continue to study. And if one or two people were interested, I would talk to them about it. But if I had to go and I've done this in my life, I've been a Vedic astrologer, a massage therapist, a craniosacral therapist. I have the ability to do other things. So if God wants me, what's that?
Rock star.
Yeah, well, no, I can't stay up late enough for that. That was my drawback there. And that's true in other things too. Like, for example, in the cult of personality, even with astrology, being an astrologer, why do many people become astrologers? Because that's a great way to get attention. They might have wanted to be a model, or they wanted to be this, or they wanted to be that. Well, now they can just talk nonsense about astrology on YouTube, and everyone loves them. So it's not just a spiritual thing. I think it's more global, and it really comes down to trying to find a teacher, or trying to find someone who is just so sincerely interested in what they're doing that they would do it or not. Speaking of rock stars, one of my favorite bands is Led Zeppelin. And those people in that band would have played music whether they got famous or not. Robert Plant had almost quit midway through the career of Led Zeppelin to become a school teacher, right? Because he did not, well, at least my understanding is, he could do that and he could still play music and still love music. You understand the difference of kind of what I'm saying here?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I've actually had this discussion with some students of mine, and we kind of came to the conclusion that perhaps a spiritual teacher should have a secondary source of income, so that they're not completely dependent upon generating interest in everything they do to provide their entire livelihood, because this can lead to manipulation on behalf of the teacher. If things start going south, well, then they might create new interesting ways to try and gin up some interest and create new avenues for income that might not be completely conducive to the goal of the process or the path. And so that does seem like a decent, and of course that doesn't go for everyone, obviously, but I think that can be a good sort of compromise. But the issue I have with that sometimes is, well, do you really want your spiritual teacher working 50 hours a week at some stressful job they don't like, and having zero time for meditation, study, research, investigation, teaching, and all of that? Probably not. So I think there's some nuance
Right.
there.
Well, and the other problem with kind of being dependent on students means you're going to get stressed out if they're not doing, supporting you financially, and that is that it's not just that the teacher can become manipulative to try to generate more things. It's that then the teacher could become more accommodating to things that the teacher should not be accommodating to, and so then the whole process gets kind of diluted. That's a difficulty too. But Roy, in my own case, while I was ordained in 2005, and I would teach classes and I would travel around and go to unity churches and so on, every time I would bring up the idea of, I think I'm ready to just focus on teaching Kriya Yoga, he would always say, keep doing your astrology practice, keep doing that, because you need to pay your bills. That way you're able to pay your bills, and then you can do these other things without having to worry about, like you said, having to need those things to generate income. I think it's great when support does show up, but like you were just discussing, if a teacher has their own support, well, then they can teach purely. It's like Lahiri Mahasaya, working at I think he was a clerk at the railroad or at the military. Well, working there and even tutoring students, that allowed him to meet with students at night or at other times. And again, he did not have to worry about, all he had to worry about was, are they practicing well? And in my mind, I think that is the most important quality of a teacher, is if the teacher is skilled enough to know how to meditate and practice Kriya Yoga, but if they can also, if the primary focus is on focusing on the student and encouraging, finding ways to help them practice well, like that needs to be the ideal. And if anything else works out aside from that, well, that's just gravy.
Sri Yukteswar had, some family money that he was able to, in real estate investments and things of that nature, collecting rent off of rental properties and whatnot, which allowed him all the free time in the world to engage with his students, run an ashram and everything. Right. And so, yeah, I think that can be beneficial to have supplemental income, so you're not completely dependent upon, your Kriya Yoga ministry or teachings or what have you.
Right. And with astrology, that's what I was able to do. And it even worked out such that I worked on this 4-year astrology course, meaning people would have to take it for 4 years. And I was able to offer it online. And then after Mr. Davis gave me permission to teach full time, when he said it was a good idea, I was able to take that and automate it. And so students are able to go and take that course still, and that generates income so that I am able to teach as I do. So it helps. And so I think, teachers often need to figure out ways to kind of leverage their skills in that regard too. But that gives me the freedom to do what Roy did, which is do my best to focus on sharing things on a donation basis, because I'm not worried about how many donations are coming in.
Exactly.
I think that makes it, for me, that's made all the difference in the world, because on one hand, if a student's coming and they're wanting to work with you and, there's no rapport there. Well, if you were a type of teacher who kind of needed the income or something like that, the teacher might just continue and persist, even though it's not working out. They would encourage it. Whereas if you are free, then you can simply be free to teach as you know and let people come and go as they need to, which I think gives a little more authentic experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what do you say to folks that are wary of or reluctant to engage in a relationship with a spiritual teacher because of the bad rap that the guru has kind of gotten in the West, and rightfully so to a certain extent. There have been some abuses and everything. We know about all these cases, and so I run into this sometimes. And so there are people that are really reluctant or hesitant to engage in any type of relationship with, and not just talking about me, but with other gurus or other teachers, because they there's some element of fear there.
Yeah.
You know,
I think that's,
how is that changing, or how do you see that evolving here in the West or in the United States, let's say?
yeah, that's a good question. And really, I think it's good to be wary. I mean, I think more people should be warier in general. And that's, and what I think is good for a student to do is if they find someone that they're able to, read their books or attend a workshop or watch a video or something, and if they have a sense that I could learn from this person, what they need to do is just explore. All right, let's keep listening, let's keep exploring, and there might come a time where they've spent 2 to 3 years, and I think you should take time to figure out who you want your teacher to be, because it's like anything else. I mean, do you marry the first person that you see? Do you become friends with someone just because they come up and say, "Hey, I'm your friend"? You don't just say, "Well, I'm your guru," and so then everyone agrees. I think that observing those individuals that you think you might be able to learn from, and then, like you would treat any other relationship, explore that and see what happens, and always keep your radar up. It's like when I make friends, I'm fairly open to meeting new people, but these days I give people about 1 or 2 years before I make a hard decision. Like, yes, this is my friend, because you don't know what they're going to do. You don't know what's going on in their mind. You don't know what might pop out at some strange point in time. But it seems that 2 years is a really good length of time. And in the same way, people that I've learned from, I've really only learned from Mr. Davis. But there are other teachers whom I have read, and some of whom I've met, and there are only a handful, maybe 1 or 2 others, that I can wholeheartedly recommend their teachings and their writings, because never did I read anything in their books or hear anything in their lectures that made me go, I don't know about that. So when it comes to kind of figuring those things out, I want to encourage people to be as absolutely sure as possible. And if they go, I don't know about that, or they don't feel that they can get behind or understand the principles that the teacher is trying to share, they should go find someone else. I don't mean to be an absolutist, but it's like, if I'm going to spend the rest of my life with someone, I want to make damn sure that 98% of the time we're going to be on the same page.
With the occasional wiggle room for disagreement.
Well, that's right, and I think that's important. I don't know if Roy told you this, or if you told me Roy said this, but it was something like, Roy said, if you believe, or if you take 100% of what I say is true all the time, like,
no,
you might want to think about.
Yeah, it was me.
Yeah, go ahead. Tell the story.
Yeah, he said, if you agree with me 90, because I told him, and I was in a meeting with him, and I had disagreed with some little detail, and he didn't care. But he said, look, if you agree with me 90% of the time, that's great. If you agree with me 100% of the time, you probably need to see a shrink.
Yeah, you tell it much better. Well, that's exactly true. And I think that needs to be true for your romantic relationships, your spiritual teacher relationships, your friendships, your musical relationships, all those things. There needs to be, like you said, room to have disagreements and to respect that, and to be able to say, you know what, you think something different here, so what? We're still friends.
Yeah.
And I think if you can do that, things go really well. But I do feel it's important, especially with the advent of the internet. That's what makes it difficult. Is now really anyone can get on YouTube. Look at me. Anyone can get on YouTube and they can say whatever they want. And if they've got enough tenacity or enough charisma, there's going to be a group of people who are going to say, oh yes, this is the next teacher of some sort. And that's not always true. And that's why I think we really need to get to know the person, read their books, see how they behave over the long period of time, and then decide, is this someone that I could see myself learning from? Do they represent what they teach? Do they model what they teach? And if they do, always trust your gut. That's the whole point of this. There's a wonderful book. It's called The Gift of Fear. And it's written by a fellow named Gavin de Becker. And this person is in charge of kind of like security for high profile people and so on. And the entire book is about trusting your gut. And then if human beings would trust their gut more rather than ignoring the red flags when they see them, oh, well, you know, that surely that's not a problem. If they would trust their gut and go with it, yes, you might be a little lonelier than you usually are. But more than likely, if you trust your gut, you will have a strong sense of whom will help you on your path, or whom will help you in life, or who could be a good friend, and so on. I think trusting your gut is really important. And that does take a level of even mental and emotional maturity. So you have to work on yourself, because if your gut's all messed up because you've been manipulated by a narcissist, well, then you're not going to really be able to tell if you're being manipulated by another one. So that's why, one important point is to stress before beginning Kriya Yoga, before getting involved in meditation, spiritual practice, do your utmost best to be as psychologically and mentally healthy as possible. Because if you are psychologically and mentally healthy, there is a heck of a lot less chance that you will put yourself in a position where you can be manipulated by someone. Because psychologically healthy and mentally healthy people don't do that, right? Yeah. So that's my soapbox.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, last question. So what, because I receive emails from time to time, frequently actually, from people that say, I want to be enlightened. I want to be enlightened. First of all, I studied Eastern religions in college, and I've read tons of books. I spent time with Mr. Davis, a lot of time, and around some other teachers and whatnot. I'm still not entirely sure what that word means. And it means different things to different people, and it means different things in different contexts and in different traditions and religions. And but I know what they mean when they say that, or at least I think they do. But so anyway, yeah. Sometimes when people ask me that, or they say, I want to be enlightened, sometimes the first thought, getting back to my snarky, snide personality, is, you sure about that?
Yeah, right.
Really?
Yeah.
You have any idea what you're getting yourself into here? So, and that's not to dissuade anyone, by the way. It's just the thought that comes to my mind, knowing this process I've gone through and all the garbage I've had to unearth in my own being, and all the karma and all these things, and the discipline, spending all this time sitting still, with your own thoughts, looking yourself in the mirror every day, and seeing some things that aren't so great. And then of course the alternative to that is just complete avoidance and escape, from all of that. And there is some truth to the fact that ignorance is bliss in that regard, to a certain point, of course, and then bliss is bliss.
Right.
But so what do you tell folks when they come to you super enthusiastic and they say, I want to be enlightened?
Well, the first thing I say is take my 2-year Kriya Yoga Apprenticeship Course, and then we'll talk.
Yeah.
Well, no. Well, that's kind of joking, but it's kind of not, because my theory is, if you say that to me, and then I say to you, all right, well, here's a 2-year course of study you can commit to. If they make it to the end of the 2 years of study, well, then I think we can actually have a real conversation about it. But you never really know what's on their mind, and so if I do have the ability to sit and talk with them, that is the first thing I might ask is, well, what do you mean by enlightened? Just like you were saying, like everyone has a different idea. Someone reads Autobiography of a Yogi, they think that's what it means to be enlightened. No, that's what it means to be Yogananda living his life, right? That's not what it means to be enlightened. And then once you get a sense of what they mean, well, then you can kind of tease out whether like the spiritual path is really the thing that they want, because this is why so many people begin a spiritual path and a spiritual tradition and then quit, because what they think the spiritual tradition is going to give them is what they want, when that's really not the point of the spiritual tradition. And when they go through and they start meditating, they start studying, and they start engaging in the process, and they don't all of a sudden have their family life completely healed. They don't all of a sudden have, their mental, emotional needs perfectly met. When that doesn't happen, and they think that's what enlightenment is, well, then they stop and they don't do it anymore. And so kind of getting this baseline of what is the individual talking about, because the spiritual path, and I think Mr. Davis, Roy, really illustrated, demonstrated, modeled this. I'm not sure what the right term is. The spiritual path really isn't meant to be focused on getting the best job, getting the perfect relationship, getting along with everyone. All these things, those are things that you do in life. Those are like worldly things that you attend to by doing things that give you that experience. Mm-hmm. The Kriya Yoga path, the self-inquiry path, Buddhist path, all these things, the purpose of them is to give you a realization of what it means to be infinite, timeless spirit. That's why you do the things that are in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. That's why you listen to your spiritual teacher. That's why you meditate for long periods of time. Well, that's what it's supposed to do. And many people think it's supposed to do these other things, which are activities like, healing your relationships. Spirituality is not going to heal your relationship. You know what will? Going to a counselor and making choices that allow you to make better relationship choices. That's what will heal your relationship. Kriya Yoga is not going to heal your body. It's going to help because the things that are recommended to meditate well tend to make you healthier. But that's not.
If I practice Kriya every day, you mean I'm not going to live forever?
Well, funny that you bring that up, because one of the latest comments on one of my YouTube videos was I was teaching a class and I had my hair down. And when my hair is down, you can see it, like I'm just gray all over the place. It just looks like, I've got this Gandalf thing going on. Mm-hmm. And the person wrote, they said, they totally didn't even listen to the video. They said, well, it looks like you have a lot of gray hair. And I thought Kriya Yoga is supposed to make you younger and live forever. And clearly it's not working. So how can I believe the rest of it? So
yeah, because we all know of some enlightened masters that have lived forever, right?
Right. Yeah, there's one down the street. I go see him every day.
They all get sick and die. Wait a minute.
Yeah, right. But I mean, that's another important point. That do you have a few minutes, or should we wrap it up?
Oh yeah, please.
That's another important point, because again, when I would teach the classes at the Asheville Meditation Center, there were people that sincerely came and wanted to learn because they wanted to live forever. They wanted to know, they wanted to live forever.
Who would want to live forever?
Yeah, well, that's what I thought.
My God, man.
I tried to explain to them. I said, look, even the Mahamrityunjaya mantra, people look at that mantra as though that is a mantra which will allow a person to live forever. What they don't realize is that we are living forever. The real us is eternally alive. And the whole point of Kriya Yoga practice and the the Mahamrityunjaya mantra and so on is to give you the realization of what is the real you, which is eternal. So when we hear about yogis that live forever, they're just a metaphor, or I guess metaphor might be the right word, for understanding and identifying with that aspect of ourselves which is eternal. And then through the meditation practice, when you realize that, you don't wonder, am I going to live forever? Because you've got a body that's going to come and it's going to go, just like every experience does. But you are that eternal presence. You realize it, and then you live forever. But it's not because you physically are living forever. It's the soul, the spirit, the pure conscious essence of you, which you recognize lives forever. And that's going back to like orthodoxy and dogma when we started. Sometimes people might need to believe in Babaji as living forever to keep them inspired. But hopefully they will grow and they will have meditative experiences where they'll be like, oh, okay, so I'm not my body, which means it's okay if the body has its issues. and I know what I am, it's like they can use that orthodoxy or that dogma or the fantasy, the enthusiasm that comes early on, but they have to be open to growing into greater insights of what is possible. And why would you think that what you imagine enlightenment to be is actually what it is? You know, when I was 18 years old and I got started, I thought enlightenment was a certain thing. Do I really want it even to be what 18-year-old Ryan thought enlightenment was? You know, it's just part of this growing process that we have to participate in. And that's again why, if you are mentally and emotionally and psychologically healthy and mature, you will be able to embrace those changes. Why? Because we cling to fantasy and we cling to things that aren't true and dogma and so on because we don't feel safe. And ultimately, I think that's one of the biggest problems with spirituality in the world, is that people come to it because they're looking for safety. And I think it's important that they find safety, but I think that's a bigger issue for society. That's not necessarily a spiritual issue. I mean, I could be wrong about that, but that's just a theory that I have.
Well, what do you mean by safety in this context?
Well, think about it. And if people, okay, think about why, or the people you have met who have gotten involved in spirituality or joined meditation groups or went to churches and these types of things. From my observation, it always seems like what they really want is to belong, right, to feel safe, for people to appreciate them and to love them unconditionally. You know, all things that are spiritual values. But why do they want that? Because they didn't get it as a kid, because society didn't give it to them. And so they're coming at it from a place of like the younger version of them is working through the adult body, and the younger version is trying to get needs met through, like I said, community and so on. And until that younger aspect of them has really been addressed and made to feel safe on its own, they're never really going to feel safe deep down inside. And if society had changed, if parenting styles had changed, if we have an understanding of people psychologically, if all that changes so that we know how to support people so that they feel strong and safe and secure, then they won't need to feel like they have to belong to things, because they'll feel confident in themselves. And then they'll be able to actually engage meditation and spiritual practices, not because they're being driven by unresolved unconscious conflicts, but because they actually really want to know what non-attachment is like, what purity is like, what pure awareness, pure consciousness is like. Does this make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I agree. And but yeah, I think it's a much larger issue, and I think it does have to do with how our society is organized.
Yeah.
And what we value as a society, and it's particularly here in the West, it's a very individualistic, every man for himself, survival of the fittest, laissez-faire, capitalist, right, free for all. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't really support human needs, as right, we've come to find out. Yeah, I think, I just want to thank you for doing this interview, but also for being an inspiration for me. I've been going through kind of a crappy time, as you know, and I know you've had some not so great experiences. Life has kind of beat you up here and there, but I've noticed that even if you get down for a little while, you keep bouncing back, and so I've been thinking a lot recently about resilience.
Yes.
And the importance of resilience and perseverance and endurance, because man, there are some times, and everybody goes through this, I guess, I assume, where you want to give up. Right. You just want to give up. You're like, yeah, I mean, all this spiritual work I've done, what the hell? I've spent like 20 years meditating, and still when something catches me off guard or catches me by surprise, I react negatively, I suffer. What the hell? I thought all this meditation practice was just supposed to solve all that. And as we come to find out, it doesn't. And life continues to happen. And you do continue to have your ups and downs. But one thing I've noticed is that it's sort of like an XY graph, axis. It's like, you have your ups and downs, but without meditation, you just kind of stay on that same plane. It's just ups and downs, ups and downs, ups and downs. But with a sadhana, with this practice, you still have your ups and downs, but the overall trend is sort of an upward trend, even though some of those troughs can be pretty gnarly. But, if you have that internal inner strength, that, we get from our practice and from our relationship with the divine, it does help with this process of resilience, endurance, perseverance. So can you just share a few words of wisdom with me and for my listeners about resilience and bouncing back and just moving on, doing your best, and just keep going,
Yeah, I mean, that's really all you can do, I think. At least that's been my experience, and partially my own resilience comes from being stubborn, I think.
Not necessarily a bad trait.
Yeah, I suppose. But the thing that has helped me in all of this, which I don't know if I ever would have been able to hear this when I was younger, but after having gone through some difficult experiences and observing, I don't like to admit it still. I'm working on it. I don't like to admit it still, but almost always every adversity or challenge that I have experienced was there, and I got, like, it helped me spiritually. And I want to stress that by those challenges, I don't mean like problems that we make for ourselves. Like if we have a gambling addiction, we should take care of that. We shouldn't say, well, this is here to give me, greater whatever. I'm talking about when life just happens, when things happen. You've done your best and things just happen. When I look back, I don't like to admit it still, but almost everything has helped me realize something spiritually speaking. And so I'll give an example, and I know you've heard this before, Chris, but like when my late wife, Melissa, was on her way out, and she'd been through all these treatments, and I was meditating by her while she was in bed, and I got to a still place, and I just asked, why would this happen? Like, how is this even possible? Someone so healthy, probably a better person than I ever will be. How could that happen to them? And what happened was it boomed in my mind. So you'll learn this isn't real. And that was just like everything exploded. And the first thing I thought was, I don't need to learn it this way.
Yeah, there's other ways, man.
And that's exactly what I said. But this is what makes spirituality so hard, is that sometimes those things that come into our lives, we won't learn them any other way. I would not have learned that any other way, no matter how much meditation I did, no matter how many times I read the Sistas Yoga, where it says that exact thing, no matter how many times I studied the Holy Science, where it says that exact thing, that all of this is just the play of images in the mind of God. Essentially, it's all ephemeral.
Right.
I could hear that and I could think about that, but I personally had to go through that experience to bring that home. And that's a terrible way to bring it home, but it shifted everything for me spiritually. And there were other things that I've experienced too, where the exact same thing happened, where I didn't want this to be the case. But when I sat back and I meditated and I just kind of observed, what was it pointing out to me? Almost always, if I paid attention and if I could get away from my own personal need to have it go a certain way, if I could just really, suck it up and look, see what's going on here. Every single time, I can't think of one time that I have not seen a deeper reason, spiritually speaking, not in regards to anything else than spirit, but spiritually speaking, that I have felt. And I was even meditating on this last night. In all those things, what did I learn? I'm still here. I'm able to be here and have this conversation with you. Since many difficult things have happened, I've been able to continue to teach and reach more people. And what I learned, the fact that I could keep going through each of those things, was that I actually am supported. And that might not sound like much, but that was a pretty heavy realization for me. And it's you don't want it to be that way, but sometimes we have to have these difficult experiences, and in the moment, they might seem so overwhelming and devastating that we can't really get to the insight just yet. But if we can maintain steady with our meditation practice, with some kind of inner sense of possibilities that there's a bigger picture going on here, when we get through it, sometimes things are presented to us that we couldn't have dreamed of. And Roy's talked about this. My life now is, I could never have dreamed of the situations that I am in, but every single one of those situations is beautiful, despite other problems that have happened. So that is what has allowed me to develop greater resilience, was to stay true to what I knew the path was all about. And I did have the support of Mr. Davis, and he would say things to me like, no matter what's going on, I can't do miracles for you, but remain centered in the self. And because I had 18 years of a relationship with him and I trusted him, I listened, and I didn't like it and I squirmed, but I said, just stay centered in the self. And for whatever that meant to me, as I made it through, I looked back, and it gave me the ability to see, oh yes, wow, that was no fun, but for whatever reason, I had to experience it, and I was supported, and here I am, and I look around, and I can't complain. I woke up this morning, so I'm still winning, right? So I don't know if that's what you were going for, but that's a general, that's what I would say about those things.
Yeah, I'm waiting for some of those beautiful insights that you describe. I'm sure they're coming at some point.
I kind of have a feeling they are. And what I would say to that end, because what frustrated me to no end, to hear kind of what I just said, other people said those kinds of things to me too. And it just drove me up a wall. I was like, people would say, well, if you don't know that it's a gift yet, you haven't made it to the end. And I'd be like, a gift, you know what? All kinds of foul language would come up in my mind. Uh-huh. But what I would say is, if you can at least entertain that as a possibility, do that, but also give yourself absolute, complete freedom to admit that what you're going through sucks. Don't sugarcoat it. Don't act like, oh, God is testing me. Tell God, this is a terrible thing. I can't believe this is happening. Be absolutely honest with your feelings about where you are. Being clear, it's like having a relationship, like we were talking about, having a relationship where you can disagree. You want to be able to disagree with the fact that this is going to do anything good for you, and you want to admit that you don't believe that at all. But try to imagine, hold in the back of your mind that you're open to the possibility that just maybe something good could come from this. And it's the same thing with Mr. Davis. You might have had this experience too. He was quite a bit older. He saw things from a different perspective. And sometimes he would recommend things that I thought, I don't know about that. Like, maybe he's just out of touch. But then because I trusted him, I admitted I didn't agree, but I waited to see. Maybe he's right. And sure enough, most of the time he was. So I tend to kind of treat life like that guru now, where I might not agree, and I'm very verbal about it, but I'm waiting. And I try to be open in that regard. So be honest, feel like crap, but still get up and do your meditation with maybe things are going to work out.
I freaking love it, man. You're the only spiritual teacher I know that would say, be honest, feel like crap, get up and meditate anyway. And that's wonderful. That's basically what I've been doing.
Good.
It's just working. It's working out, But at any rate, thanks so much for the inspiration, the constant inspiration. And I really appreciate it, and hope to talk to you again soon.
Yeah, we'll do it. It was wonderful. Thank you for having me.
This episode of the Kriya Yoga podcast was made possible by donations from Kriya Yoga Apprenticeship students and supporters of our Patreon community at www.patreon.com/Kriya Yoga.